as all-encompassing as one might expect. And there are a couple instances of columnists who I found who really take cinema patrons to task for not paying attention during movies. So, for instance, a columnist for the Manila Times sarcastically describes the, quote, helpful nature of, quote, talking movie house ladies, and they're always ladies, end quote, who interpret plot points and describe the scene on screen. So this is what he writes of these ladies. At first, I thought that the talking movie house ladies phenomenon was only confined to the pangmasa, or less expensive theaters. So the wifey and I started paying double for premiere theaters, those with comfy numbered seats and free popcorn, thinking that these places can buy us some peace and quiet. It was a foolish assumption, of course, and we only ended up trapped in our numbered seats as LSBYTTHS, and then he has this in parentheses, lady sitting behind you talking to her seatmate, kept up a merry commentary behind us, end quote. And I also found another one, which of course I referenced in the chapter on the multiplexes, which is talking about how it's worth paying the extra to go to Shangri-La because then you can sit in peace. People won't sit there and text. They won't get up and leave the movie theater. So there are these sorts of modes of behavior which are sort of prescribed. Within the spaces of alternative exhibition sites such as Cinecat Punan and Mogwai Cinematheque, these democratic and sacred divisions operate in quite different ways than the ones described here in this column, often combining the abstraction of the art house text predicated on maximum ambiguity and thus difficulty in analysis with the standards of cinematic comportment more commonly associated with what Andrew calls the fairground or village square, or what this columnist above calls the pangmasa local theaters. In Mogwai, for instance, viewers commonly walk in and out of the screening area though it is partitioned from the bar-restaurant space, and just kind of sit in while eating food and then leaving when they're finished. Moreover, the kinds of text circulating within these spaces often encourage this manner of spectatorship. Screenings frequently consist of a series of shorts due to tendencies to exhibit student works, institutional advocacy films, first-time filmmakers, and experimental pieces. In other cases, filmmakers' works provoke a wandering eye through other means, their long length. Raya Martin's Now Showing, for example, one of the first Filipino films to play in Cannes in 3 decades, had its Philippine premiere in the Mogwai Cinematheque, where viewers circulated in and out for the duration of the film's 5 hours. La Diaz, whose works are known for their duration, has also exhibited features that vary from 6 to 11 hours, with audience members coming in late, leaving, or taking extended breaks during the course of the film. And international critics sometimes comment on these pieces, and these comments sometimes seem more appropriate for that these pieces seem more appropriate for gallery spaces than for cinematic exhibition, which I think is interesting because I think it perhaps alludes to the sort of ways that cinema exhibition that works in this way might be specific to this particular context. So this is one critic who was at Cannes who wrote amazingly Che, which is the new Che Guevara autobiographical film, wasn't the only 5-hour pseudo-biopic to premiere in Cannes this year. Down the Quasset at the Breakaway Directors Fortnight Fest, Filipino director Raya Martin's Warholian Now Showing devoted even more screen time, 291 minutes, to its chronicle of a Manila girl's evolution from adolescence into adulthood. This film is probably better suited to gallery spaces than traditional cinemas. I would add to the listing of gallery spaces and traditional cinemas, alternative cinemas in Manila, with their mixture of art house cinema mode of immersion and the fairground exhibition mode of distraction, a mixture that exists in symbiosis with the cinematic works themselves, as well as with the community of active spectators created by the distractive elements of the viewing ritual. Neither international multiplex nor art house cinema nor gallery in the conventional sense. These spaces draw instead on both the ritual of the image and the social aspects of cinema exhibition. This might not be that unusual, removed from the cultural context of the Philippines. However, when read against critiques of local pangmasa cinema behaviors in the era of international multiplexes, this emphasis on sociality becomes tied to cultural conventions. And so after this discussion, the chapter basically talks about this cultivation of translocal screen cultures, through what I'm terming at the moment vintage modernities. Okay. So as these cinematic screening events emphasize sociality, they also encourage a particular kind of locality through their emphasis on local cinematic subcultures formed around shared tastes for both local and international productions. This locality enacts a remove from the modernizing, homogenizing, and diluting processes of global mass culture, using its moments of, quote, outward orientation to become more locally concentrated on the one hand and cultivating a very specific relation to modernization on the other. The combination of nationalism and nostalgia is quite common, and in post-colonial settings, this link often means a pre-colonial folk nationalism. The kind of nostalgia at work in the alternative cinema exhibition spaces of Manila, however, alludes to the possibility of a somewhat different combination of national identity and nostalgia. Rather than embracing the folk nostalgia of the pre-modern, this nostalgic nationalism constitutes a kind of quote-unquote vintage modernity, connoting a time frame preceding the global mass cultural onslaught of the current period, but positioned well within modernity's parameters, a pre-global mass culture utopia that adopts localism to counter global capitalist homogeneity and nostalgia to offset the bloated development striking much of Metro Manila in the form of high-rise condominiums with names like Manhattan Garden City, which is often cited as, you know, oh, haven't they built that yet? I didn't know the Cubao Expo was still there. So there's often fears of like urban development encroaching on what's conceived as kind of a unique space. Okay, the Mogwai Cinematheque in particular operates in this framework of nostalgia via vintage modernities, operating around Cubao through both its history and its current role as home of the discarded, sold in periodic garage sales, antique stores, and yokai shops. In addition, the space of the Cinematheque itself is embedded in this environment, and it cultivates its own brand of cinematic nostalgia. Its facade features an old-fashioned movie marquee, and while the interior of the Cinematheque itself is quite unconventional, as described above, its membership options connote the traditional movie palace, as the marquee suggests, dividing into a rolling scale with choices ranging from lodge, balcony, to orchestra. The construction of a movie palace, even if only through the rhetoric of its marketing materials, suggests a regard for cinema going as it, quote, once was, outside of the mall multiplexes which comprise the vast majority of cinema going opportunities in Manila. And then also, the works, I sort of look at the way the works create cinema canons, both local and translocal. So both Cinekatapunan and the Mogwai Cinematheque were established as venues for local independent cinema, and as such they play predominantly Filipino works. On occasion, these works are also juxtaposed with films from outside the Philippines. So Cinekatapunan set aside Monday evenings for foreign works, mainly from Southeast Asia, but occasionally from elsewhere. The Mogwai Cinematheque, on the other hand, is a markedly international program, marketing itself as a hub for, quote, films from Hollywood classics to underground cinema, art house fare to Pinoy groundhouse flicks, thus mixing local independent fare with alternative cinemas from Hollywood and elsewhere. In addition, the venue's launch, during which guests mingled with the exterior of the building, included projections of art house cinema from Cannes, a series of shorts called Cinema. So as one review of the venue writes, the second floor is home to the screening room, a cozy little private cinema that regularly shows movies that would never make it to our cinemas. There's no better place to catch movies considered off the beaten path. It's hard to find any place that's showing Glengarry, Glen Ross, or Chacon Son Cinema. In addition to this canon of art cinema, the venue also shows more obscure, small-scale works, often with a link to local production. So, for instance, the Just Cause program featured works by a French UN worker and her Mexican artist partner, who exhibited a piece on water privatization in India with first-time Filipino filmmakers' documentaries. Okay. So this chapter proposes then that the variety of collective local identity emergent in these sites is positioned within the framework of a selective cosmopolitanism based in part on the consumption of particular international cultural products, which creates communities based on patterns of consumption organized not in terms of local versus global origins, but via positions within a transnational canon. At the same time, however, these communities are ultimately committed to local cultural artifacts and solidarities. This combination of a localized commitment and transnational taste culture cultivates a dimension to the formation of national identity akin to what I would call a translocal culture, embracing the artifacts of local and transnational intelligentsias. Unlike the